Hi everybody, good afternoon to you. I'm very happy to be here. My name is Yoram Perry and I'm the K Chair in Israel Studies, the Barbara and Jack K Chair in Israel Studies, and the Joe and Alma Gildenhorn Director of the Institute for Israel Studies. This event is one of our many events that we do during the year. It's called the Dubin Lecture. It's the fourth time that we're having it. And it is only just one of our events, our programs. We have a very large program, both academic and non-academic, more public. The institute that was established 4 or 5 years ago is now the fastest growing institute in the United States. Last year we had 500 students who took 15 courses on Israel. In addition to teaching about Israel, we are very much involved in research. We do all sorts of research projects. As a matter of fact, today, if you will see our site, you will see a new research paper, and the title is Israel War Against Smoking. Previously, we had a wonderful research paper on Israeli economy, on Israeli education system. So you are invited to look at the site israelstudies.umd.edu. We are doing a major research which we call Israel 2023, that is to forecast the future of Israel when it reaches the 75th anniversary. And it's done by a group of professors both here and in Israel, looking into the scenarios, different scenarios, what path might Israel choose if some forces are stronger or some other forces are weaker. So this is one aspect, the research. We have begun this year with a new program of graduate studies, and we have here with us the two first graduate students. Where are they? Would you raise up or show you, get up? They disappeared. They were in the reception. Here she is, here she is. And we also would like this year to enlarge the number of minor students and to improve the program. And we have some very many goodies for students who would like to join this program. So I urge you, students among you, or if you're not a student and you want to join us, you are welcome to look at the site as well. I want to introduce the speaker who will introduce our major speaker. And the one that I want to introduce is a person that I was thinking of her when I read a few days ago about a new book that was published. The book is called The End of Men and the Rise of Women. And then, I haven't seen the book yet, it just published for 4 or 5 days ago, but I read an article about it, a review. And it says that the gist of the book is that we are entering a period when men are losing their grip, patriarchy is crumbling, and we are reaching the end of 200,000 years of human history and the beginning of a new era in which women are on the rise. Now, why does this happen? Because, I quote, our new economy does not care about physical strength, but instead favors social intelligence, open communication, and ability to sit still and focus. Things that are, at a minimum, not predominantly the province of men. I thought of it when I realized that our College of Arts and Humanities has, as of last year, for the first time, a woman as a dean. So I'm going to present a woman, not a man. Bonnie Thorson-Deal is the first woman who served as a dean of the College of Arts and Humanities. We knew her for years for her pioneering scholarship studying the interaction of race, class, and gender in the United States. She got very many prizes and awards. I'm not going to mention all of them. It will take time from our speaker. As she's a long-time chair of women's studies, Dr. Deal had led women's studies at Maryland to a national prominence, and it's a fact that everybody who is in the field knows that. She is a beloved teacher, an excellent mentor, and a wonderful colleague. In the last year since she became a dean, we discovered, or at least I discovered, many other wonderful traits that she has. One of which is a vision. She really does have a vision. She is an institutional builder, and we could realize that in a very short period of time. She is a real leader with an unusual organizational ability. And indeed, she does lead the school, the college, to a higher level and a higher academic level, which we're all of us are so happy with. Without her support, her help, assistance, the Israel Studies program could have not been so successful as it was in the last several years. She does help us a lot. She understands our needs. She understands the vision that we have. And we are very proud and happy to have her with us. She's an excellent teacher, excellent mentor, a wonderful colleague, and it's really a pleasure to work with him. I give you Dr. Deal, please.
Well, no one will ever say that Yoram Perry lacks charm. Thank you for such a lovely introduction. On behalf of the College of Arts and Humanities, I want to welcome you here today and to this event. I want to begin by acknowledging Ambassador and Alma Gildenhorn and thanking them for their support for the Gildenhorn Institute and for the university, and actually for the support for the performing arts, because we're in their room today. If you didn't notice the name of the room that we're in, I want to thank you, and I want to thank Dick and Liz Dubin for their support of this lecture series, and all of those of you who are supporters of Israel Studies, and all of those of you who are interested enough to make time in your schedules to be here because you want to learn more and understand these issues. I thank you for coming out. When Professor Perry and his colleagues planned this event last spring, they anticipated that it would be timely and that the upcoming election would provoke interest. They did not know, however, how current events would move the politics of the Middle East and Israel further into the center of broad public discourse about the presidential election. Each day, new stories break, and each day the candidates and their surrogates restate and refine their positions in an effort to affirm their foreign policy credentials and commitments. Actually, perspicacity and timeliness are hallmarks of the work of the Gildenhorn Institute for Israel Studies. The Institute brings to campus outstanding speakers, teachers, and events to thoughtfully engage and expose our students, faculty, staff, and friends to a wide variety of views and expertise on Israeli history, culture, religion, and politics. In addition, the Institute is a major participant in programs and curricula on the Middle East, giving strength and depth to the college's growing expertise in this field. With its large number of undergraduate students, its new graduate programs, its publications, and deep commitment to both academic and applied policy research, the Gildenhorn Institute for Israel Studies is rapidly becoming a major intellectual force, not just on this campus, but in the region, the nation, and globally. Part of the stated mission of the College of Arts and Humanities is a commitment to vigorous intellectual debate in a diverse community and to the value of interdisciplinary approaches to major issues and ideas. Our understanding of and ability to address the challenges in the Middle East today and the future of Israel itself will grow out of this willingness to participate in such sometimes difficult discussions with people from many different fields, conveying our views with respect and listening to the arguments of others with equal regard. When we gather together to wrestle with the multifaceted issues facing us, we both affirm and extend what happens in the classroom. So as dean, I'm proud of the college's role in fostering campus-wide dialogue of such compelling topics through our annual Dean's Lecture Series and through this very special event today, the Dubin Lecture. This lecture series is a vital means of helping us to fulfill our mission. And as part of this series, the Gildenhorn Institute for Israel Studies has hosted a wide range of prominent speakers to help us think creatively about seemingly intractable issues in the Middle East. Past speakers have included Washington Post columnist David Ignatius and Israeli Ambassador Michael Oren. This afternoon, it's my pleasure to introduce the 2012 speaker, Mr. Chris Wallace. During his distinguished journalism career, Chris Wallace has received 3 Emmys and a Peabody Award. Since 2003, he has been the host of the public affairs program Fox Sunday News, and previously, Mr. Wallace worked at ABC News for more than a decade, where he served as senior correspondent for Primetime Thursday, an occasional host of Nightline. In addition, Mr. Wallace has worked at NBC News, where he was chief White House correspondent from 1982 to 1989. And while at NBC, he covered the 1980, the 1984, and 1988 presidential campaigns, as well as the Democratic and Republican conventions during those years. So he has a lot to say about presidential politics. He has also served as the moderator of Meet the Press and anchor of NBC Nightly News Sunday. So this afternoon, Mr. Wallace will discuss the current presidential election and its implications for U.S.-Israeli relations. With the election only 7 weeks away and the first nationally televised debate in just 13 days, we look forward to his timely and informative remarks. So please join me in welcoming our distinguished guest this evening, Mr. Chris Wallace.
Thank you, Bonnie, for that lovely introduction. You read it just about the way I wrote it. I'm going to try to keep my remarks brief today because I know how these events can be, especially for any of you who had a big lunch today. In fact, Ronald Reagan liked to tell a story about ancient Rome. It happens in the Colosseum. The gladiators are there, and a bunch of hungry lions are turned loose, and one of the gladiators goes over to the lions and whispers something, and suddenly all the lions lie down and go to sleep. As you can imagine, the crowd in the Colosseum is absolutely furious. They're shaking their fists and howling with rage, and Caesar sends for the man to be brought to the imperial box, and when he gets there, he asks him, "What did you say to those lions?" And the gladiator says, "I just told them that after they ate, there'd be speeches." Washington is certainly a town with a tough sense of humor. They make jokes about everything here. Of course, the big story right now is that video of Romney talking to big contributors about the 47% of Americans who don't pay any income taxes. Then Romney said to them, "But enough about me." You know, all these political strategists have been trying to figure out why Romney can't seem to get his message out, and the answer is, it's hard to talk when you have both a silver spoon and a foot in your mouth. People are still talking about the 2 political conventions. As you know, they had to move President Obama's speech from the Bank of America football stadium indoors to the arena where the Charlotte Bobcats play basketball. They said it was because of the threat of bad weather, but whatever the reason, they had to move from a big venue to a much smaller place, just like a lot of homeowners over the last 4 years. Once they made the move, they had a huge lighting problem in the hall. They worked on it all day. Whatever they tried, they still couldn't get President Obama out of Bill Clinton's shadow. There was another big story last week. Computer hackers claimed to have stolen Mitt Romney's tax returns, and they said that unless Romney paid them $1 million, they were going to leak them to the press. True story. Romney looked at this. He said, "This is such an unethical money-making operation that I'm quite impressed. In fact, I could have used these guys at Bain Capital." Incidentally, in the interest of being a full-service speaker, I also have a weather forecast for you today. It is 82 and cloudy, just like Clint Eastwood. Obama's approval rating has fallen to a new low. Unemployment is still too high. Gas prices are skyrocketing. But there is some good news for the president. His fantasy football team is looking strong. There are many explanations for the weak recovery, but almost everyone agrees the housing market is still struggling. It's tough all over. In fact, bin Laden's compound in Pakistan, he finally got the mortgage paid off. He's still underwater. Think about it, underwater, get it? But Democrats know how to fight back. They love to poke fun at former President George W. Bush's intellect. They told the story of Bush and Vice President Cheney going to lunch together, and Bush tells the waitress he'd like a quickie. And she says to him, Mr. President, I am so disappointed. You were supposed to bring honor and integrity back to the White House. And Cheney, looking very exasperated, turns to Bush and says, how many times do we have to go over this? It's pronounced quiche. I want to talk today about where we are right now in the presidential campaign, looking ahead to the big debates in October and with just under 7 weeks till Election Day. Then I want to talk about the wave of violence against American interests across the Islamic world, and especially that savage attack on the U.S. consulate in Benghazi that killed 4 brave Americans. And I want to talk about the media, because we have become just as controversial as any politician, and I promise to be quick about it. As Henry VIII said to each of his wives, I won't be keeping you long. But let's start with the state of the presidential race as we sit here today. And the headline is, whether you like it or not, that Barack Obama has moved out to a small but real lead. Now, the polls vary. The granddaddy of all polls, Gallup, does what they call a 7-day rolling average, and after a 7-point swing towards Obama during the conventions, it now has the president once again leading Romney by just a single point, 47% to 46%. Whatever bounce Obama got out of the Democratic convention seems to have disappeared, at least according to the Gallup poll. But most other polls show Obama beginning to open up that small but steady lead. The new Wall Street Journal poll, just out yesterday, now has the president with a 5-point advantage among likely voters, 50% to 45%. And Mr. Obama has an even bigger lead in electoral votes, and in the end, that's all that really counts. Remember, you need 270 electoral votes to be elected president. My colleague, Karl Rove, who was the chief strategist for George W. Bush, has put together an electoral map based on local public polls, and it now shows states with 225 of the 270 needed, 225 electoral votes solid or leaning Obama, and states with 191 electoral votes solid or leaning Romney. That leaves 9 toss-up states with 122 electoral votes up for grabs. But all 9 of those states voted for Obama 4 years ago, and he has a small lead in 8 of the 9 states right now, so he has a much clearer path to victory than Romney does. There's also a growing sense among political insiders that Democrats had a much more successful convention than the Republicans did, and that the president starts these seven final weeks ahead. Why? I think for several reasons, and let's start with Romney and the GOP. I can tell you from spending a good deal of time, not only with his top advisors, but also with Romney himself, that they have had a steady theory of this contest for months now. They see it as a referendum on President Obama's stewardship of the economy. Has he done a good job dealing with the economic mess that he stepped into? Are you better off than you were 4 years ago? They felt if they could convince voters the answer to both of those questions is no, that all they had to do was reassure folks that Romney was a credible alternative, a safe choice to lead the country for the next 4 years, and they were home free. It hasn't turned out to be quite that simple. Americans are certainly convinced the economy is a mess when pollsters ask them, is the country on the right track? Is it headed in the right direction? About a third of voters say yes, and 2/3 of voters say no. But they are not sure that this president is responsible for that mess. and they are not yet convinced that they would be better off with Mitt Romney. Let's deal with those two questions separately. According to the polls, more Americans still blame President Bush, still, 4 years in, still blame President Bush than President Obama for our economic troubles. Some of you may have grown tired of President Obama, almost 4 years into office, still talking about the mess he inherited, but there's a reason he says it. A lot of voters believe it, and the constant reinforcement from the president only hardens that view. That's why Bill Clinton was such an effective character witness for Mr. Obama at the Democratic Convention. My guess is if Clinton's name were on the ballot this year in November, he could beat both of these guys by a landslide. The days when we had a balanced budget, in fact, were running a surplus, when the economy was creating 23 million jobs and the unemployment rate was under 5%, those days are looking pretty good right now. Which brings us to Clinton's speech at the convention. He talked about how he faced the same thing in 1995 that Obama does now. He said the economy was still weak, but his policies were starting to take effect and would, in his second term, lead to the longest peacetime expansion since World War II. And then Clinton said this: President Obama started with a much weaker economy than I did. Listen to me now. No president, not me, not any of my predecessors, no one could have fully repaired all the damage that he found in just 4 years. In other words, what he was saying was, give Obama more time. For a lot of voters who were still conflicted about who's responsible for our weak recovery, it was like the good housekeeping seal of approval. And you don't often associate Bill Clinton and good housekeeping. Now, a lot of the so-called pundits wondered what would happen when the August jobs report came out the next day, less than 10 hours after President Obama finished speaking and giving his acceptance speech. And the numbers were bad. 96,000 jobs created. The unemployment rate dropped from 8.3 to 8.1%. But that was because 368,000 Americans stopped looking for work. The percentage of Americans now in the labor force is now 63.5%. That is the lowest since 1981. In fact, if workforce participation was where it was now, was today where it is, where it was when Obama took office 4 years ago, the unemployment rate would be 11.2%. Pretty devastating. But the numbers apparently had zero effect on Obama's standing. And that's the question, and it's a question that puzzles an awful lot of the political chattering class. Why hasn't the weak recovery been more of a problem for this White House? I have a couple of theories. First, as I said, a lot of people still think that Mr. Obama is digging out of the mess created by George W. Bush. Or they blame the Republicans in Congress who have much lower numbers on handling the economy than this president does. But I think there's some other things going on here as well. First, we've been living with bad jobs numbers for years now. I think many voters have become numb to them. So just like the stock market tends to discount bad news it's been expecting for a long time, I think 368,000 people leaving the job force in a single month, as shocking as that seems, doesn't hit us the way it used to. We've come to expect it. And then there's the other big factor. Do voters think things would be better under Mitt Romney? Remember, I said the Romney strategy was to try to turn this into a referendum on the Obama record. But they realized they've got to convince voters that the governor is a credible alternative. Well, the Obama camp also realizes that, and they're doing everything they can to make this not a referendum, but a choice election, not up or down on the president, but Obama versus Romney. Who do you trust more to lead the country, to handle the economy? And they've done a very effective job of roughing up the challenger. Since Romney, in effect, wrapped up the Republican nomination back in April, the Obama camp has been going after him hard. Remember, Romney had to spend tens of millions of dollars to win the primaries, while Obama could build up and sit on his war chest. Once it became clear that Romney was the opponent, the president's men carpet-bombed him with months and millions of dollars of television ads, while Romney was husbanding what little money he had left until he formally accepted the nomination the last week in August, and he could start spending money that he had raised for the general election. And what did the Obama folks do? They painted Romney as a rich, unfeeling corporate raider who doesn't care about middle-class families, and frankly, they had plenty of targets: Bain Capital, Romney's tax returns. The effect of all this is that Romney's favorability numbers cratered this summer by almost 20 points. More people had an unfavorable impression of Mitt Romney than a favorable impression. According to one of the polls, Romney came out of his convention with the lowest favorability rating of any nominee in more than 20 years, which is why he went into the Tampa convention with a lot of work to do. The week before the convention, as part of a charm offensive, the Romneys invited me to spend a morning with them at their home in New Hampshire, where they made pancakes for the family and me on camera. Now, I know I'm great company, and Lord knows I bring a good appetite to the table, but the sudden interest in feeding me was clearly an effort to humanize Romney, to make him look more sympathetic. And it continued at the convention. Ann Romney gave an effective speech talking about her husband's compassion and strong feelings for the country. I thought Romney also gave a good speech. He talked about all the women he appointed to his cabinet when he was governor. He went after the disappointed Obama voters who voted for the president back in 2008 and are now on the bubble. He told them this: "You know, there is something wrong with the job he has done as president when the best feeling you had was the day you voted for him." And he tried to puncture the Obama rhetoric with this line: "President Obama promised to begin to slow the rise of the oceans and to heal the planet. My promise is to help you and your family." All good stuff, but it didn't, according to the polls, close the empathy gap. According to the polls, voters still think by a wide margin that this president cares more about people like them, understands what they are going through, than feel that way about Mitt Romney. And that brings us to the video of the Romney fundraiser last May, which surfaced this week, in which the governor tells big donors that the government has divided this country into makers and takers. He said that 47% of Americans will vote for Obama, quote, no matter what. And here's how he defined them, quote, "There are 47% who are with him, who are dependent upon government, who believe that they are victims, who believe the government has a responsibility to care for them, who believe that they are entitled to health care, to food, to housing, to you name it." Romney concluded, "And so my job is not to worry about those people. I'll never convince them they should take personal responsibility and care for their lives." There's a lot to say about this. First of all, even in a private fundraiser that you think is off the record, it is remarkably dumb. You do not write off half the electorate, half of your fellow Americans. You can't win 99% of all remaining voters, so you have to find a way to reach out. Second, Romney was just wrong. So many of the people in his 47% are not just potential Republican voters, they are Republicans. Romney conflated the 46% of Americans who pay no federal income tax and the 49% who receive government benefits. In those two groups are seniors living on Social Security, folks who receive Medicare benefits after a lifetime of paying into the system, former military who get VA benefits, and a lot of white working class folks who qualify for the earned income tax credit that was supported and built by Ronald Reagan. There are millions of voters in that group who don't consider themselves victims, who don't feel entitled, and who know all about taking personal responsibility for their lives. I don't know how damaging that video is going to be to Romney. We haven't seen enough polling since the story broke late Monday, but it clearly isn't good news, and it certainly feeds into the Democratic narrative that Romney is out of touch. There is one way, however, in which I believe this could be a plus for the Romney camp. There is growing frustration in GOP circles that Romney has been sticking to this Obama referendum strategy for too long, that he has failed to make a positive case for himself. The video blunder almost forces him now to try to turn this into a choice election, two competing visions for the country. And here's what Romney said Tuesday to my colleague Neil Cavuto. "We have two very different views of America. The president's view is one of a larger government. I think a society based on a government-centered nation where government plays a larger and larger role, redistributes money, that's the wrong course for America." No Republican is going to tell you the Romney video is a good thing, a plus for the campaign, because it isn't. but it may have the unintended consequence of forcing a cautious candidate to finally make this race about big things. More important, we still have 4 debates in October, 3 presidential and 1 vice presidential. I moderated a number of GOP primary debates last year, and Romney, I can tell you from being up close on the stage with him, can be very effective, especially when he has his sights set on one target. Just think back to how his combination of sharp attacks in the debates and then negative ads took down Rick Perry and Newt Gingrich in the primaries. Now, the Romney camp talks about, wishes for, the same thing with Barack Obama. I think it could happen, but I think that Romney has a lot of work to do in these next 2 weeks before the first debate. People believe that Romney can turn around the economy, but they're not convinced he will make things better for them. Maybe for big business, maybe for his rich corporate pals, but not for them. And the new video only adds to that perception. That's why I think that Romney has to do something big in these next 2 weeks. His tax plan is to cut everyone's tax rates 20% across the board and then make up for all that lost revenue by closing loopholes and ending some tax deductions. But Romney has refused to say which loopholes he will close, probably because most of those loopholes, things like the mortgage interest deduction and charitable contributions, are very popular. And in the absence of any concrete proposals from him, the Obama campaign says that Romney's rich friends will get a big tax cut, while middle-class families will pay $2,000, middle-class families, $2,000 more a year on average. I think what Romney needs to do in these next 2 weeks is to put some meat on the bones of his tax reform plan. He needs to say, I will eliminate or limit this deduction, that loophole for people making over a certain amount of money, say $250,000, while keeping those deductions for the middle class. He has said he intends to maintain the progressivity of the tax code, but he's got to make it more real. If you make this much money, along with lower tax rates, you're going to lose these loopholes you've really come to depend on. Wealthy people are going to share the pain of getting our fiscal house in order. Somehow, some way, he has got to counter the image that he's Robin Hood in reverse, who wants to take from the poor and give to the rich. I don't think he can just count on the poor economy to get him over the top. We've had a weak recovery for years now, and it hasn't been enough. Obama is still leading. I think Governor Romney has to do something big and soon to get voters to rethink how they feel about him and whether or not they're willing to give a new man the top job. Finally, last week, national security, foreign policy, became an issue in the presidential campaign, and it's about time, because while it's understandable that the candidates and voters are focused on the economy and the millions of folks who can't find full-time work, America is, in case you forgot, still a country at war, with tens of thousands of brave young men and women on the front lines and Islamic jihadists still in the shadows, still looking for some way to hit us. We were reminded of that fact, if we ever forgot it, last Tuesday, the 11th anniversary of 9/11, when angry Arab protesters stormed our embassy in Cairo, and then the violence spread. By Wednesday morning, we had learned the worst: the sacking of the U.S. consulate in Benghazi and the slaughter of those 4 young, brave Americans, including the U.S. ambassador to Libya, Chris Stevens. I have been struck this last week by the Obama administration's reaction to the violence. Although there were protests and attacks against American interests in more than 24 countries across the Islamic world, White House spokesman Jay Carney had this explanation: this is not a case of protests directed at the United States writ large or at U.S. policy. This is in response to a video that is offensive, Carney was referring, of course, to that obscure trailer on the internet of a movie that has never apparently fully been made that insults the Prophet Muhammad. We had Susan Rice, the American ambassador to the United Nations, on Fox News Sunday last weekend, and in my typically gentle fashion, I asked this question about Carney's statement. You don't really believe that, do you? Rice's response: Chris, I absolutely believe that. In fact, I think it's the case. She went on to say that just as with Salman Rushdie's book, Satanic Verses, or the Danish cartoons of Muhammad, this wave of violence was all about the video. And when I suggested to the ambassador that part of the problem, big part, might be U.S. policies, since President Obama took office, Rice flatly rejected that as, quote, just false. You may remember the president came in with a bold plan for a reset of U.S. relations with the Muslim world. In his Cairo speech in June of 2009, he called for a, quote, new beginning in the relationship. He said the trauma of 9/11 led us to act contrary to our ideals and promised to, quote, change course. And the focus of this fresh start was to be a new engagement with both our allies and our enemies. How has that worked out? Well, the president clearly has some successes to brag about. He has conducted the war on terror aggressively and effectively, launching many more drone strikes than President George W. Bush ever did, and of course taking down Osama bin Laden. But that wasn't the point of the Cairo speech. The president was saying that Bush acted like the bully boy of the Middle East, and he would be a much better partner. It hasn't worked out that way. Let's be honest, once the Arab Spring started last February, things were always going to get more complicated for U.S. foreign policy. The American president, any American president, was no longer going to be able to call up his friendly dictator and say, hey, Hosni, stop those demonstrations in the street and protect American interests. Democracies replaced dictators, and Islamic groups were now free to take to the street and protest. But critics of this administration say Barack Obama has made it clear that he is disengaging from the region, that he is pulling out. And as a result, according to the critics, our allies no longer trust us and our enemies no longer fear us. Let's take a few examples. President Obama pulled U.S. forces out of Iraq in compliance with the Status of Forces Agreement negotiated by George W. Bush. But it had always been anticipated that there was going to be a follow-on agreement, in that some U.S. forces, around 20,000, would stay in that country as part of a long-term relationship. Now, there are no U.S. troops in Iraq, and Iran is increasing its influence in Baghdad at the same time that Sunni violence is resuming in the western part of the country. Afghanistan. The insider attacks are now so widespread that this week the Pentagon suspended all joint operations between U.S. and Afghan forces, all joint operations, because we don't trust the Afghan military and police not to turn their weapons on us. The whole point of our mission over the next 2 years is to train up the Afghans to take on the Taliban after we leave in the end of 2014. That's going to be hard to do if we're unwilling to put any American soldiers in the field with Afghan forces. Israel. On Sunday, Ambassador Rice, in my interview with her, once again said the overall relationship between our two countries is, quote, unprecedented. It has never been stronger. But if it hadn't been for the attacks in Cairo and Benghazi, we would have paid much more attention to the extraordinary comments from Prime Minister Netanyahu last week when he said this: those in the international community who refuse to put red lines before Iran don't have the moral right to put a red light before Israel. President Obama and Prime Minister Netanyahu held their midnight phone call last week to try to patch things up, but the divide is deep and real. Netanyahu believes that Iran is on the path to a nuclear weapon that poses an existential threat to Israel and is fast approaching a zone of immunity when Israel, at least, will no longer be able to stop them. And the Prime Minister is still not convinced that this president has his back. Which brings us to Iran. Mr. Obama came in pledging to engage the mullahs to have direct talks without preconditions. Almost 4 years later, I think it's fair to say that that outreach has been a dismal failure. The Iranians have continued their nuclear program, while the U.S. has persuaded the European community to impose tough sanctions on Iran and that are clearly beginning to hurt the economy. They have not stopped the Iranians from building more and more centrifuges and continuing to enrich uranium. And all the talk about isolating Tehran has failed completely. Just last month, you may have missed it, Iran held a summit of 120 non-aligned nations. Despite our pleas to our allies to boycott, the leaders of Afghanistan, Egypt, and Iraq all attended, and so did Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General of the United Nations. Last Sunday, in addition to Ambassador Rice, we also had Congressman Mike Rogers, the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, on the program, and he offered a very different analysis of the situation than Ambassador Rice. He said he did not believe the violence was all about the video. He said his sources tell him al-Qaeda is clearly using that recording to incite violence. He also said a senior Middle East intelligence official had asked him recently, "What is your country's policy for the region? Because there is no U.S. leadership." Rogers went on, "The countries in the Middle East believe there is a disengagement policy by the United States, and that lack of leadership on what our position is causing problems." Rogers said, "We must take a stronger stance in the region. We must make it clear we have interests we will defend, and that we must condition new foreign aid on countries promoting and protecting those interests. If we fail to do all that," said, "we will see many more attacks on U.S. property and personnel in that very tough part of the world." I'd like to conclude, and we're going to do some question and answer, by talking a little bit about the media, because I know that many of you have deep reservations about us. You think we're too liberal, or in the case of Fox News, maybe you think we're too conservative. You think that we either get our facts wrong or we make them up. And you think that especially in television, we distort the news by trying to fit it into our time limitations. Well, I just want to assure you that we're aware of some of those problems too. In fact, I like to tell the story at ABC that if David Brinkley had been around during biblical times, he would have begun his newscast one night by saying, "Good evening. Moses came down from the mountain today with 10 commandments from the Lord God Almighty. Here now is a report on the two most important." Well, let's see if I can deal with some of the doubts that people have about us in the news media. When I considered coming over from ABC 8 years ago, I did something that most critics of Fox News never do. I actually watched it. And what I found was that across the broadcast day, the vast majority of Fox News reporting is straight, even-handed, and very watchable. During the last presidential campaign on Fox, you heard every nasty thing the Democrats said about John McCain. Back in 2000, it was Fox that broke the story that George W. Bush had a DUI arrest years before, and they broke that on the final weekend of the campaign. More important is the job we do every day telling the news in an aggressive, compelling way, whether it's politics or the disorder, the disarray in the Middle East, and we do it with a fraction of the resources of the big broadcast networks. Now, I know some of you are saying, wait a minute, what about Bill O'Reilly? What about Sean Hannity? No question about it, they're conservatives, and proudly so. But I would submit that those are opinion shows and openly labeled as such. No one would suggest that they are straight news reports, and while they're both very popular, they are not what the basic mission of Fox News is all about. I want to make one final point about fair and balance, and this came as an eye-opener to me. I thought, coming from a traditional broadcast network, ABC, that we were fair and balanced, but since moving to Fox, I've come to see things a little differently. I think there are some unexamined assumptions in the mainstream media, some ideas that are accepted as givens. There's a widely shared sense that liberal positions on such issues as the environment and gun control, gay marriage and abortion are the conventional wisdom. More conservative positions are seen as conservative positions. There's a widespread belief in the media that government programs always solve problems and that taxes on corporations and the wealthy are good ways to cut deficits and don't put a drag on the economy. I'm not saying those ideas are right or wrong. What I'm saying is that they're accepted by most of the media as the baseline, without examination. Well, at Fox News, we say everything gets examined, liberal ideas as well as conservative. No one gets a free pass. What could be healthier? But you know, tough is the criticism that all of us in the media may get. I can't help but feel that in some ways, these controversies are good for us. Over the years, the media has gotten a little too self-righteous. We're busy criticizing presidents and popes, but feel we're above criticism. We're immediately always suspicious of every public official. Well, criticism can teach journalists some humility. That is never a very pleasant lesson, but it sure can be a good one. I feel proud and privileged to be a reporter. It's been a ticket for me to be an eyewitness to history, and it's an honor to bring the news to the American people. Someone is always going to be mad at us, and sometimes we will make mistakes, but the Founding Fathers knew what they were doing when they put freedom of the press in the Constitution. Our job is to live up to that responsibility. Thank you all so much. So we're going to have a little conversation.
Sit over there. Thank you, Chris, so much for the very interesting speech. We really enjoyed it. I didn't know that you can take a position of one of the late night programs. So many jokes in the beginning. Wonderful. I really enjoyed it. But we have plenty of time for questions, and I'm sure that there are many questions that people would like to ask. We'll give some preference to the students. So who is the first?
First of all, thank you so much for coming. Quick announcement before I ask my question. Molly and I will be holding a discussion about this, but for you just to kind of digest the conversation, we'll be standing out back, so anybody is welcome to join. I do have a question for you.
Where are you going to do it here?
Yeah, we'll probably just go outside.
All right. You see, they are going already to analyze your speech. Excellent students. We have very good students. Will there be a...
I'm not going to get out of here before that happens, but go ahead.
There might be an exam after that. Maybe you'll talk to the mic, please.
Ah, good. Yeah, why don't we, people, if they want to ask questions,
Right.
the two mics.
Yes, please do that. And over there as well.
So, I actually last week had the opportunity to hear from the former commander of the IDF, General Danny Khalutz, who spoke pretty passionately about his disdain for Netanyahu's suggestion that the United States should impose red lines. So specifically, given the tremendous divide, even in the Israeli intelligence and military communities, about the actions that ought to be taken towards Iran, what do you think that this particular administration should have been doing differently?
Well, let me take it from both points of view. First of all, from the Israeli point of view, I think that Netanyahu is playing a very high-risk, some might even say dangerous game. On the one hand, I give him, and I've known Netanyahu, Bibi, since the 1980s in New York. On the one hand, I give him I believe that he believes what he says and that he sees Iran as an existential threat. And I think, although, as you say, there's a wide difference of opinion as to how close Iran really is and whether they've actually even made the decision to develop a nuclear weapon, I fully sympathize. If you're the leader of a country and job one is to protect that country, and in Israel the idea of protecting it from another Holocaust is clearly seared into your consciousness, I take his concern and zeal about doing that very seriously. On the other hand, there are an awful lot of people, both in the United States and in Israel, who feel that he is playing a very heavy hand in the American political campaign. And that if Obama wins, not that Obama is going to turn his back on Israel, it's too important geopolitically and politically, but that he is, if there's a choice, a marginal choice, an incremental choice between doing Netanyahu a favor or not doing him a favor, he's not going to feel any particular need to do him a favor. From Obama's point of view, it's a tough one, and part of it is you begin to say the intelligence, but the intelligence assumes a level of certitude that we have seen, with great reliability over and over in the last decade, from the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq to the question of whether or not Iran has a nuclear program or stopped it, and they've had different national intelligence estimates which have said different things. I don't think the president can or should be bullied, in effect, by Netanyahu into making a decision and setting a red line that he doesn't feel is appropriate. On the other hand, I think he clearly has to listen, and obviously the history of Mossad intelligence is probably better than the history of the intelligence of the CIA.
May I add on that? You covered so many elections, presidential elections. Would you say that the issue of Israel is more central in these elections because of the Israeli government's attitudes than in the past?
Yes, I would say yes, because one, Netanyahu has forced it onto the agenda. In addition, because of the stakes that are involved. I mean, it had not often been the case where Israel and its posture played such a direct and obvious life and death role. Post 9/11, that part of the world, it used to be, in the old days, we had a nice simple relationship with the Russians, and that was the key life or death issue for American presidents and potential presidents when it came to foreign policy. Now it's the Middle East, and now it's especially Iran and the possibility of their getting a nuclear weapon. So Iran's nuclear stance, Israel's attitude towards it, the possibility that Israel may strike, and clearly, I mean, I don't think there's any question that one of the things that Netanyahu is doing is he has leverage now that he will not have the day after the election when either Romney or Obama is elected. So he's trying to use that to maximum benefit now. And part of that is the implied threat that in the next 7 weeks, he could launch a unilateral strike, which would have not only huge geopolitical and foreign policy and national security implications, but because of oil, have enormous economic implications as well. I would have to say that Israel and Iran and that part of the world is playing a more central role action than any I can remember in recent history.
Therefore, it makes Israel and other states in the Middle East less a bipartisan issue as in the past?
Well, yes, and I think that the support for Israel is bipartisan. I think the desire not to have Iran get a nuclear weapon is bipartisan. Nobody is saying throw Israel to the, we can contain a nuclear. It's that there are differences in policy how to achieve both of those things.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I'm flip the script. This is coming from a pretty conservative, so I'm going to say that this is an one-sided question. And I recognize. There you go, right? I haven't understood about the election. You were talking about how hasn't this referendum on President Obama, and he hasn't made out, big ideas and big topics. And one thing President Obama has is he's talking how the middle class is shrinking, but is how the poverty level is at an all-time high. I know the last report I saw was 15.3%. And I don't understand why the Republicans and conservatives haven't pushed the growing poverty clear things. You're saying every time jobs reports they're falling, but poverty rates are at an all-time high, and that's not something that's almost getting covered ever on on any kind of TV.
I'm not sure. Let me make a couple of points. One, I'm not sure I agree that it hasn't been covered, and Lord knows Ron talked about that there are many millions of American foods before. I don't think that Obama is because the economy stinks. I think people fully just back. Now, it ticked up a little bit after the Democratic convention. They think they did a pretty good selling job, particularly Clinton. But I think that's not the problem. The problem from Ron's point of view isn't that people think that they haven't been given enough of a reason. The fire Obama equation a lot of people get, the higher Romney part of the equation, not sure they get. And, I'll take a couple of examples. I mean, tax holy grail of conservative economic philosophy. It's what Bowles-Simpson was all about. You lower the tax rates, you do a lot of the $1 trillion in tax expenditures every year for a variety of tax deductions and loopholes, and you use some money to one, to lowering the rates, and two, perhaps to shrink deficit, that and so on. Romney is for that, but he refuses to have a single tax deduction he would eliminate. Why? I find that astonishing, and it seems for a guy who's being portrayed as he's much more concerned about his wealthy friends at the fundraiser in Boca than he is a six-pack. Why not say, I'm going to take this, or it's going to go from 35%, but, that big deduction you got for your vacation house or this or that, you're going to lose it. It seemed indicated it would give him a lot more credibility to make that argument. So I think and again, I don't have to do that because I'm an alternative, this other guy stinks. It hasn't worked. He's got to bring it to the game, and he has to hurry. Name.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Thank you for coming. I mentioned that Romney hasn't put forth any actual tax reductions or general given out policy proposals. I was wondering, what if Governor Romney is elected president? What do you think president look like? Like we saw in Massachusetts, or
Some of the. It's a very good play, because Romney has evolved. Would be moderate, and it's only. I mean, I don't want to, but I think he would be more moderate because the problems that the country faces are such that they would force him to have to look at accommodation. I didn't ask, but it was a good question in the debate in Iowa in August of last year when my colleague Brett asked the 10 up on a deal, a budget, and it was $10 of spending cuts for $1 of tax increases, would you accept that? And not raise their hand. Well, what a bunch of damn fools. I mean, if you could get a $10 in spending cuts for $1 in tax increases, you'd see not to take the deal way to try to deal with our. So, and do I think that Romney would be willing to make that deal? Yes.
All right, go ahead.
So if that's such a clear economy, why has Romney pushed more position?
Put more towards what position?
More towards African Americans where DC would look like as.
Because he's deathly afraid of trade as a flip-flopper again. I mean, there has been such an evolution in his view. One thing he will not do is change any position taken in that position, as the conservatives would say, you know what, there he goes again.
Yeah. Please, the lady here.
He was first.
It's all right, doesn't matter. He will come.
And there's a mic here
Well,
as well.
I'd kind of like to get back on his face when the camera was on for his first words, and then on Obama making fun of what McCain was saying. So media is accusing for us who our candidate is that we should elect. And it's not about what they're actually saying, but it's what the media picks and chooses to tell us what they're saying
Bush.
and what's not, or what's good or bad.
You know what? You're right. And we're going to have a meeting actually a week from today at 20 New York. I just wanted to, no, I'm teasing. If you're saying to me it's a liberal bias in the media, that's why Fox News is so successful. That over the course of a presidential campaign, people get a pretty accurate sense of these two guys. And I can't say that it's all the creation of, they took one picture of this, one picture there of that. I think that undersells the intelligence of American voters. There's no question an awful lot of why they went for Obama in 2008 was emotion, was hope. You know, we were fed up with our politics, and he seemed to represent turning the page. And
Yes.
quite frankly, I think most people would agree, John McCain, while a great American and a great patriot, was not the most oriented candidate. The Republicans, you know, if it had been Ronald Reagan against Barack Obama, it would have been a very different outcome. But it wasn't. That happened. And one of the interesting things, talking about that emotion in some of the Romney ads, they will say, it's okay, you were disappointed, we understand, but it's time to change. And what they are finding that a lot of the Obama voter went for him sort of love affair, disappointed and won't give up, and so that they're having to do a kind of emotional, like, you know, let's break the bond here, in addition to just the issues. But like the years, the scripts, all the contests, we get the president we deserve, and that's a bad thing as well, a good thing.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Government.
I'm a fellow at the school, and I'm from Hungary, actually, that's why my accent. And I also about Romney, because on a few times your speech that you met him, you spent some time with him, you even and I was.
Did he say spanking or pancake?
No, pancake. Sorry.
Pancakes, yes.
Yeah,
Buttermilk,
I mean,
pancake.
Yeah, I mean, if there was anything, I'm curious about that. And then I would like to go
Get
on
this
record.
man's name.
Okay, so I was wondering, I mean, what your impression went off camera, because judging by what you see on camera, you saw and did, you could really have this. He was like really, he would do whatever he needs to. I mean, this comment that, and he was accused of hiring illegals. That I'm running for office for a course like that. So, what your personal impressions were?
I would say, as I've thought about this a lot, a three-dimensional character, off-camera, but I will do the biggest single difference between private, and I say private in quotes, off-camera, when they're with reporters, they're not really persona that I saw was George Bush. I'll never forget the first, after I became the anchor of Fox News, he would do, and presidents subsequently and before him have done, they will give a lunch for the anchors of all the evening newscasts and the day State of the Union speech to kind of pitch, here's what we're going to program for the next about George. True, during Fox News. And he said to me, wait till you see this. And afterwards he said, and I said, he's unrecognizable. Bush was so much with a quickly detailed, educated in his analysis, and all of the kind of dumb boy image that a lot of people had about George Bush was totally not accurate. It was what they saw, and is to cause his staff to tear out what the real man was. I would, as president, and that on vacation.
Thanks. You'll have to raise your voice.
I'll hear that. Well, the question basically is, what campaign promises these candidates make, given the Constitution says it's up to us to actually make the laws? Well, yes, that's true constitutional. There's no question that a president has an enormous impact on country. I mean, I've thought of Bush, Gore in 2000. I mean, and you could say better or worse, but different the country would have been if Bush had been elected. You know, some people say he was elected, but, you know, if he had won the presidency and been sworn in one, it would have been an utterly different country. How different it was if, with Obama, with McCain. And, you know, that's get to the whole question of consequences. And, you know, whoever's election will take us in a directly different direction. And yes, they'll have to deal with it. And, you know, Gitmo is still, and I said he was going to cut the deficit in half. In fact, he's added 50, he's increased it by 50%. But it's a very different country, and it will be different if Romney is president, if Barack Obama. I'm not saying better, you have to make that judgment. But, you know, in the end, I think the individual campaign promise is less